Aaron, you've been covering Harris Veep stakes day in and day out. We hear this rollout is going to be major. How do you think it's all going to unfold?
I mean, look, this is a process that she knows well. I mean, she just went through it herself 4 years ago, right? Right now, it's just a whole lot of us sitting around waiting for the big news. It's high stakes. We're all kind of trying to read the tea leaves here. And so what's it going to come down to? I think, the campaign has said that there's going to be, this digital rollout at some point tomorrow. That's not unlike the way that we've gotten a lot of other news. I believe that might have been how we got the news about her. For 4 years ago, the announcement. I mean, it was a very tightly, closely held decision that then candidate Biden made, and we, a lot of us found out there was no leak, there was no scoop on that. The vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris was named, and then there was all the excitement. So I think that she's maybe trying to replicate that. I think it's going to come down to simpatico and who can help her win. And so you have those, apparently a white man maybe is one of the things that it takes to win. That's something that we saw in our poll for the 19th News and SurveyMonkey, that Americans felt like she might have a better chance winning with a white man. So I guess we'll find out who the winner is in just a few more hours. Somebody who can deliver a state, perhaps, somebody who she has simpatico with, and somebody who, frankly, can help her win and has chemistry with her.
Susan, we've seen it sort of laid out because the process of picking a running mate has exposed the divide between Democratic progressives and moderates. Can you lay it out what the concerns are? We know it's a big tent party, and they've now made it clear all the different factions, their priorities.
Well, this is definitely played out in full public view, although in a very compressed and accelerated timetable. I think, one thing is that you've seen on a positive side, you've seen all these possible vice presidential candidates racing to the airwaves, getting out there as surrogates for Vice President Harris in the effort to show what a good vice president they would make. In a way, you wish the Democrats could keep that going. I imagine they would, enjoy having all of these very aggressive, accomplished surrogates out there on the campaign trail, and they got to find a way to make the losers tomorrow still engaged in the campaign. But to your question, I am wondering, once a choice is made, right, then that's where Democrats start doing their Democrat thing and, start fighting with each other in public again. Josh Shapiro, as the presumed front runner for this vice presidential nod, has taken a lot of the arrows so far. Both you've seen some dumps of opposition research against him, but also on the substance side, on the policy side, you've seen a lot of pushback from some of the pro-Palestinian protesters and their advocates on social media. But then the flip side is you see a lot of centrists say that's why he would be perfect, and that let's beat him up a little bit on the left, and that will convince centrists who actually might hold the key to this election that Shapiro is a good choice. So he's drawn a lot of the lightning so far. Mark Kelly, we've also seen some reporting about him in recent days that suggests that people are letting loose some damaging information, maybe to test how damaging it would be or not. We'll know in a few hours, as Aaron said. It's important to keep this in mind. Vice presidential running mates have not really proved decisive in recent elections. I saw one analysis suggesting you're looking at maybe 0.5%, perhaps, impact in key places. Remember that it was Barack Obama who won Paul Ryan's district back in 2012 when he was chosen as the vice presidential candidate for Mitt Romney in the key state of Wisconsin.
But, Susan, can I just push back on one thing? We don't know that Democrats are going to start airing their dirty laundry after she makes that VP pick. We all thought that would be the case if Joe Biden stepped aside. We thought it would be a Democrat food fight and that the convention would be an all-out war, and that's not at all what happened.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I'm interested to see whether we see a reversion to the norm or not, Steph. I don't know what's going to happen because in so many ways, this election is off the script, right now. And, Democrats seem to have made an extraordinary choice, really. Many of them united to push out the incumbent president of their own party in the effort to win this election. So they may be willing to obscure differences that in a primary might have assumed paramount importance. We just don't know the answer. We'll know a little bit more tomorrow.
Reese, Republicans' answer to this big Harris campaign push is to send J.D. Vance on the road. Spending your summer with J.D. Vance, that is how you have been spending the last few weeks. How do you think this is going to go? You've been his traveling companion.
Yeah, I spent about a couple of days with him last week on the traveling the West Coast. And this is kind of what the Trump campaign kind of wants to happen. They want to send J.D. Vance out as this quote unquote policy attack dog towards Harris and towards the Democratic Party. And that's something that they're really trying to do. You've seen that, he has kind of come out and really talked about policy. In my interview with him, that was something that a lot of questions were geared towards policy, but that was kind of the thing that he really was more forthright in talking about was when I was asking him questions about policy. And you also saw his interview with the Nelk boys. What I asked him about the border wall and border security and kind of what he would want to talk about that. He said that the border security will be a mainstay in the election. I asked about Obamacare, and they talked about overhauling Obamacare, about how what that would look like and how they would want to pursue some reforms, and also about the tax credits. They want to cut the corporate tax rate back down to 15%, as Trump has said. They also, J.D. Vance, also a big advocate for a child tax credit, which is also in line with some Democrats as well. And so those are some of the policy things that they're really going to send him after.
Hold on. When did J.D. Vance become a big advocate for expanding the child tax credit? He may have changed his tune and said, I think I may vote for it, but that's certainly not J.D. Vance being a big advocate for it. When did that happen?
I guess when I was talking to him, that was something that he did say he supported, that he would like to see a big child tax credit, were his words. And that is something that he does support.
All right, Aaron, Donald Trump weighed in on Harris's VP candidates, and here's some of what she said. Some of what he said.
All of the people that she's looking at are considered much better than her. These were people that were thinking about running. They would have run, except that they didn't want to go through this roadblock with her, and because you're the vice president. So they wanted to go pick them, and I think virtually every one of them is considered better, smarter, would be a better president than her. But we can't allow her to be president. She's going to destroy our country.
She'll ruin it.
Aaron, what is your take on this response, that all of these potential VPs are better than her?
Well, all of those potential other names that were out there quickly lined up behind Vice President Harris in the days after, literally hours after she said that she was going to earn and win this Democratic nomination, which, she secured that nomination with support from delegates within the first 32 hours. And as you said at the beginning of the hour, she managed to secure the necessary delegates to become the official nominee as of this evening. So if these candidates were better than her, they certainly didn't seem to think that their chances were better than hers, because they are endorsing her. And, just to go back to something that Reese was saying, I understand that J.D. Vance is out here trying to talk about policy, but that's not what the headlines are. The headlines are around, childless cat ladies and, dunking on Simone Biles pulling out of Tokyo. So, it sounds like the Trump-Vance campaign is pretty much on defense and kind of scrambling to get back into the headlines, as Harris seems to be poised to head into yet another week of momentum with this VP pick, her delegates secured, and, trying to shore up even more volunteers, supporters, and voters headed into the Democratic National Convention in a couple of weeks.
Well, let's talk about one of those policy issues. It's the first thing Reese mentioned, immigration. J.D. Vance wants to go on offense when it comes to immigration, and there's this idea that it could be a weakness for the VP. But NBC is reporting that VP Harris wants to go on offense, and she wants to do it this week. Susan, what do you think we're going to hear from her on this?
Yeah, she road tested this line of argument a little bit last week, Steph, and I thought it was quite successful. Essentially, rather than just accepting the idea that this is a big vulnerability of hers, she's using the fact that Donald Trump basically sank the bipartisan immigration deal that very conservative Senator Jim Langford had negotiated in the Senate with the blessing of Republican leaders. Donald Trump then sank that deal rather than give Joe Biden, then the candidate, an issue to use against him in September. But then he handed him an issue by doing that. And I thought Harris's use of this line last week was very crisp. And it essentially said, like, wait a minute here. You want to talk about immigration? Great. There's a bill. It's on the table. I've endorsed this. I'll sign it as president. Where are you, Donald Trump? And I think that is a very effective way. The other point that I would make about immigration is that for most voters for whom this is the top issue, they are already very likely Trump voters in this election. Immigration has been the most salient issue for Trump voters. Donald Trump himself believes this is the reason that he became president in 2016, is because he emphasized this issue. It's one of the reasons he goes back to it again and again and again. So in many respects, when Donald Trump talks about immigration, he's already talking to the converted in this campaign. And I think that Harris is likely to use that line and then move on to issues that might actually prove more decisive with the swing voters.
For the last 2 weeks or so, Donald Trump has been trying to distance himself from Project 2025. But now one of its key architects, a man by the name of Russell Vought, is reportedly still getting ready for Trump's return to the White House and him potentially having a big role in it. Reese, I thought that the Trump team once was trying to get rid of the plan. What is your take on Vought still being so closely tied to this campaign and the transition team?
Yeah, it's not just Vought either. It's John McEntee as well, who is a key Trump aide in the White House. I think the whole thing of them trying to separate themselves from Project 2025 might just be kind of them trying to separate themselves from the playbook while still trying to keep some of these allies that worked on the program close. Because a lot of these people that worked on the program are either alumni of the Trump White House or they are still pretty close to the former president. And so I think that it's just, he is just trying to have his cake and eat it too, where he's able to say, oh, no, I don't really agree with Project 2025. I'm going to get away from that. But also some of the people that are working on it, I still support and are likely going to still play a role in the second administration if that does happen.